Hey folks, welcome back. So now let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. I have known Awais Spall for, I don't know, over a year now. And every time I run into him, I learn something new. And I am struck by how caring and knowledgeable a practitioner this man is. I think you're really going to enjoy getting to know him. And what we're going to talk about today, well, it's a pretty far-ranging conversation, but it's about the health of your microbiome and how it affects your mental health, your metabolism, and your immune system. We know that there's literally no part of our body that's not affected by microbiome health. Microbiome medicine is about rebalancing and nurturing your body's biome. It's less about completely eradicating something and more about bringing things back into balance. Awais Spall, who is certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I discuss how he combines Ayurveda, functional medicine, and peptides to create protocols that help optimize the health of the microbiome. And if you're new to the system of Ayurveda, you'll want to tune in as we deep dive into the definition of Ayurveda and what the 3 doshas are. Awais Spall FDN-P is a functional medicine practitioner based out of Santa Monica, California. Prior to becoming a health practitioner, Awais worked as a formulation chemist for various cannabis companies. And as a product formulator, Awais combined his knowledge of formulation chemistry with his background in Ayurvedic herbalism. Awais has inherited so much of his knowledge around Ayurveda from his grandfather, who himself was a renowned herbalist in Pakistan. Awais eventually left the formulation world to pursue his deeper calling in life as an alchemist of the healing arts. In his practice at Integrative Oasis, Awais combines the cutting-edge science of functional medicine with Ayurveda to address various gut health issues. His practice also integrates peptide medicine, bioregulators, exosomes, ozone therapy, plant medicines. I mean, the list is long, among various biohacking technologies to create optimal wellness. So, if you would like to connect with Awais, you can find him on Instagram at Integrative Oasis or through his website, integrativeoasis.com. Now, you also know that if you get value from this episode, you're going to hopefully want to share it out with your friends in your networks and anybody else who you believe can get value from it. And if you're really inspired, if you would leave us a review, I would be massively grateful, because it's those reviews that helps the podcast be seen and helps me to get more amazing guests for you guys. And if you want to connect with me, the best place to go is my website, natnidham.com. That's where you can find all my other podcast episodes. It's where you can find information on my upcoming Women's Longevity and Resilience Retreat this coming November in the Dominican Republic. It's also where you can sign up for my newsletter, so you're always in the know. It's where you can, let me see, what else can you do there? Oh, you can get information on my private membership community on Mighty Networks, BSP community. And of course, you can also learn a little bit, I think, about my Facebook community, which is the Optimizing Superhuman Performance Group. So that's it for me. And now, without another moment's delay, let's dive into the episode. Hey, folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome to the podcast, Awais. I'm so happy that we're doing this right now. It's, I don't know, I'm just really stoked.
Me too, Natalie. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. We're touching on topics that I've not touched on in this podcast. I mean, I've studied Ayurveda a little bit, which is a little bit which is silly, because Ayurvedic medicine being a 5,000-year-old discipline, to say that you did a little bit means you kind of know what the word means, and that's about it, right? But talking about, I remember when I first met you and you started explaining to me about, I spend my time kind of in the space where Ayurveda meets functional medicine, meets peptides. And I was like, whoa, we need to talk. This is super cool. So I think this is going to be a really great conversation, not to mention your focus on the microbiome on top of all that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just let you set the stage here. How did you get into all this? You don't have to give us your life story, but, a short little kind of synopsis of what brought you to this world of combining these really different disciplines and bringing them together.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story starts with my grandfather in Pakistan. My grandfather was an herbalist, and a Ayurvedic practitioner. He would disappear, go off into the mountains, and come back with all these wild and crazy medicines. And I knew about this and, kind of grew up with this knowledge and this history. And it wasn't until around 7 years ago that I really started to own that. I always saw myself as a scientist. Since I was a little kid, I was like, I want to be a scientist. I'm a science guy. And Western science, the scientific method was just my God and my idol. And then in 2017, around 2016, 2017, I was at a conference, and this Brazilian medicine woman just tapped me on the shoulder, and out of nowhere, I didn't know who she was. She just said, "You need to connect with your heritage." She's like, "I could sense you since the moment you walked into this room."
Interesting.
And yeah, it was just one of those like really bizarre encounters. She's become a good friend since then. And I told her about my grandfather, and she's like, you need to connect with his legacy. She's like, talk to your dad and ask him about your grandfather's like works. And my dad actually was really surprised, and he was like, well, I should go back to Pakistan and get them, because I don't have a lot of his writing here. So he went back and he got his writing, and my grandpa spent a lot of time interested in the kidneys, the urogenital tract, and I found his writings to be so fascinating and interesting. And that just kind of intrigued me and provoked me to go deeper into Ayurveda beyond like the herbalism, because the herbalism is kind of what I inherited from my grandfather. But beyond that, like, what is the tradition and how does it work? So in addition to Ayurveda, so I love Ayurveda, but I really like microbiome medicine. So
Okay, wait, let me stop
know,
you there. Let me stop you.
yes.
For the people who don't know, let's define what Ayurveda is, and then let's move into microbiome medicine.
Yes. Okay. Great idea. Yes.
Let's just define Ayurveda so that people kind of have a little package waiting, and then we move over to microbiome medicine, and then we're going to start to pull things together.
That's perfect. Okay, great.
Okay.
So Ayurveda, the word Ayus means life and Veda means science. So it's the science of how to live your life. How does Natalie Nidham live her life to her fullest potential? If I was to work with you, that's a lot more than any system of your body. That's mind, body, spirit. So I really like that it integrates that, and it even thinks about your dharma, which is your purpose. And if you have some of those other pieces and your purpose is not in full alignment, it doesn't make a whole lot of your life will not feel complete. We will not be able to eradicate some of those things. So some really important concepts in Ayurveda that are going to be coming up in this talk and this conversation. One is the doshic system.
Yes.
And the doshic system is constitutional assessment. We all have different constitutions that are blends of different elements. And these doshas make up a lot of who we are, and it makes up what things we're attracted to, what energies we're attracted to, what foods we want to eat, how we want to live our lives. And sometimes we have to bring in other elements in order to balance ourselves. And imbalance spiral is what creates disease in the Ayurvedic model to begin with. So these three elements are Vata, Kapha, and Pitta. Vata, think about thin, slender people that are airy, they're very philosophical, they're very excited to start new things. They don't care that much about food. They can eat, but it's not a huge part of their identity. They love to just think and be immersed in experiences. That's like your Vata types, right? And disorders can be Vata disorders like anxiety. The drying out of a system in the body is very considered Vata. Then you have Kapha dosha. Kapha is the blending of water and earth. So kapha are people who have stronger frames. They're bigger, they're very warm, they're very grounding. And these are people who often do really enjoy food, and their constitution, kapha disorders tend to be a little bit sticky. It's like the coagulation of blood and other systems in the body. So balancing kapha means to balance that kaphic energy.
It's also like slower digestion, right? Like people with slow digestion, like that kind of, I'm like I said, I did one course, so I remember some of it a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So that's what kapha is. It's slower. Vata is faster. Vata is fast gastric emptying. Vata often relates to the colon as an organ system because it's tied to that speed. And then Pitta is the fire element. This is kind of like your natural athlete, your fiery person who their body is fiery. They have more endurance than the average person. They can be prone to anger. They love their spicy food, but it's often not good for them because it just adds more heat into their life. So they often need more cooling, kaphic things. They need some of that vata energy as well to balance out that pitta and that fire. I've worked with some athletes that are very, very, very pitta. I worked with a guy once, the most intense pitta. He needed to wear a 50-pound bag of rocks when he went hiking with his friends because it would annoy him how slow people were. And that's the only
The
thing
only
that
way to
would
slow
slow
them
him down.
down.
Exactly.
That's
That's like
hilarious.
a very pitta like analogy there.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, and then people are usually combinations of these, right? Or they can be like you rarely come across someone who's only pitta or only kapha, right? So people can
Exactly.
have different, but then what dominates is where you need to bring in the balance to offset it.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So someone can be vata kapha, someone can be kapha pitta. Some people can be, uh, some people can be tridoshic. They can be all the doshas, and that's very rare. But there's like these doshic exams that are really popular, these doshic tests. A lot of them are very, very similar. Deepak Chopra has one that I recommend and utilize. I've modified mine with some other some metabolic typing testing, which is
Yeah.
a different type of testing, but also constitutional assessment.
Cool. All right. So let's park the Ayurveda for now because we can talk about Ayurveda for a whole hour. Let's now move, and we're going to bring it all together at the end. Now let's go over to microbiome medicine. Let's just talk about that. And then if you want to refer back to Ayurveda, you can, but I just feel like let's take the three pieces and then let's tie them together at the end.
Yes, absolutely. So there is actually a connection point with Ayurveda and the microbiome.
Yeah.
And Dr. Deborah Lee Moda, who's a friend of mine, she's an Ayurvedic practitioner, and she's been studying Ayurvedic texts that talk about the microbiome as the invisible life force, the invisible entities, small, tiny entities living inside of you. And when you start to read some of these ancient texts, it's really remarkable. They are describing the microbiome the way that some microbiologists describe the microbiome, just with slightly different language. So for me, it was a natural position with just my own health and healing journey, seeing that so much dysfunction exists in the microbiome, seeing that we are close to, one part microbial and then one part human. And we constantly discover new microbial organisms, right? Like there's Dr. Stephen Fry, who runs Fry Laboratories. He's been documenting unclassified fungi. There's quite a few mutualists that are being discovered that are, you know, like small parasitic-like organisms. Now we have phages, right? Phages have been around. What's the role of phages? So in my own health and healing journey, the microbiome was just such a critical part of that, you know, seeding it and just making it a resilient ecosystem. And for me, health is about resiliency, and I just see a resilient microbiome as getting us to that optimal place.
Yeah. Well, that makes all the sense in the world, right? So that the balance, the bringing health to your microbiome and whatever that means. I mean, it affects your everything. It affects your mental health. It affects your metabolism. It affects your immune system. There's literally no part of your body that's not affected by it. So it, you know, and having it be the seat of your health in so many ways makes all the sense in the world. And, you know, it's interesting about Ayurveda kind of somehow alluding or mentioning or talking about the microbiome in the text. I mean, if we think about Ayurveda, this is an art and science form of medicine that's been around for 5,000 years. Like there's, you know, I remember even in that one course, just thinking there's so much wisdom embedded in those texts. And a big piece of, I think, what happens these days is people like you who go digging into that stuff and then start to draw parallels and bring it together with, you know, new stuff supposedly that people have discovered now, but that actually has kind of been around for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So for the microbiome medicine, so tell us a little bit about that and how you got into that, and what does that mean? Like, is it just taking a bunch of probiotics, which I know it's not, but you know, probiotics is a big thing. You have a group of people that say everybody should be taking probiotics, and then you've got other people who are like, no, you should not take probiotics. Just eat a varied diet, you'll be fine, right? And so, you know, I know you come from the school of Grace Liu.
Yes. Yes.
You know, it's all about nuance here in this world. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that kind of microbiome
Yes.
world and where probiotics, prebiotics, all that kind of stuff fits in.
Absolutely. Yes. So gotta give credit where credit's due. Grace Liu, she's my mentor in this world. She's, you know, really been a pioneer in this field and just like helping us figure out systems and models for reconditioning the gut ecosystem, right? And just for giving us a framework for thinking about this. And I think her Gut Institute model is just so on the cutting edge. And I've really been a student of hers for years, and that's the foundation that I work off of. So to start off, the most important thing to understand is weeding, right? We have like the garden. I like to think about a garden analogy. A garden that is overgrown with so many weeds, different types of grasses that you don't want there, right? You're trying to go grow flowers or something like that. It's not going to work to just throw a couple of seeds for some flowers. That's going to look pretty messy. Some of those weeds might actually eat those flowers, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think the first step of the equation is to appropriately weed out the bad stuff. And that's where diagnostic testing comes in and figuring out what we need to pull. A lot of people have mold overgrowth. A lot of people have fungal overgrowth. Mold has just become so rampant and common in the gut ecosystem. So many people. I think we really saw a surge after the pandemic. A lot of practitioners have been talking about this. And I think fungi is the same thing. And I think there's a really important research review coming out in a few days on Candida and the research that's been done on Candida and different species of Candida. And I think Candida overgrowth, fungal overgrowth is a much bigger problem than we realize. So a lot of the art is learning how to eradicate and rebalance that using botanicals, and in some cases with doctor supervision. I always work with a medical team. With doctor supervision, pharmaceuticals are sometimes needed, especially with antifungals and mold.
Yeah.
So So what I call microbiome medicine, really a crux of it is the art and science of weeding out these different types of pathogens, knowing what to attack first, right? If you attack small intestinal bacterial overgrowth before you've attacked a protozoan parasite, the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is going to come back. So reconditioning the gut by strategically weeding things out, then it's about taking care of that soil. Then it's about sealing up that membrane, right? I call that the fence around the garden. And then the other piece is to appropriately taking probiotics, which are the seeds, to grow the things that you want. When you do everything appropriately, it's just remarkable what people experience. I've had people that want to do all kinds of things for their health. They're like, oh, give me the stem cells, give me this, give me that. I want to get rid of my little belly fat, right? Put me on hormones, I don't care. And I have seen so many people try a million things, but they'll do an appropriate weeding, an appropriate antifungal protocol, and they'll get rid of that visceral fat that they've been trying to target. They'll finally get that dewy skin that they've been trying to get. So I've just seen downstream so many things change with that reconditioning that I just see it as foundational.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. And where does diet fit in for you on all this? Because it's a big part of feeding and weeding and seeding your microbiome. Even though it's not enough, it still can make or break the success of the best protocol.
Absolutely. That's a really great question. Nutrition in this landscape, there's a lot of orthorexia and fear around nutrition. So there's a lot of people that have been taught to fear certain foods. So the food nutrition piece starts with the limbic system. The other day, I was seeing someone who has an anaphylactic reaction to just the idea of different types of foods.
To the idea of foods?
Yes, of certain types of food, just that conditioning. And then what's made it worse is a lot of practitioners running food sensitivity tests that may or may not be accurate, with questionable accuracy, telling you that, that list that you had that was already really tiny of foods you can eat, let's make that list even smaller now.
Oh yeah.
So it's that fear conditioning. So with nutrition, it just depends. It's knowing what things to avoid during that weeding protocol, right? When we're like pulling weeds, you don't want to be throwing in all kinds of fertilizer in that garden. But then it is about knowing how to saturate with prebiotics. The right prebiotics are brain enhancing, they're longevity enhancing, but they don't work. Like, just to give you an example, apple peel fiber, which is Akkermansia, proliferates Akkermansia. It doesn't quite work in people who have overgrowths of and dysbiotic terrains. It tends to work a lot better in people who have a healthier garden.
Sure. Well, that makes sense, right? I mean, if you've got a lot of pathogens and I think what's also important to note about the microbiome is very often it's less about completely eradicating something, and it's more about bringing something back into balance, right? Because even some of the things that we think, like Candida, for example, we think of it as, it's evil, and it is because it's so powerful and opportunistic. And yet in a balanced microbiome, there's always going to be a little bit in there, right?
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So it's about degrees and understanding that. And I think that's where drugs sometimes can be overused, because the objective is to wipe something out completely, where maybe what we want to do is take a different approach. You might use the drug for a period of time, but to your point, using the herbals and the prebiotics and so the garden analogy is perfect, because you're really trying to balance an ecosystem in your gut.
Yeah, exactly. With the Candida, just a tidbit I'll add in there, Dr. Ganoon and some of the research that's been done on fungi, sometimes it's measured in percentages. What percentage of your microbiome is fungal? And this research is evolving. We may change the percentages that we allocate to that, but it should be around like 2 to 6% should be fungal. And
Yeah.
now there's a lot of research on healthy biology, right? Like
Right.
healthy mycological organisms. And soon we may be able to take, mycological strains like healthy fungi, along with our probiotics. We might be having mycobiotics in
Interesting.
the market.
Interesting.
So this is where overkilling and knowing that balance piece is so important.
Yeah. So with Candida, what are you seeing in your patient load? Like, are you seeing, like you were saying 2 to 6% might be a healthier range? Are you seeing people show up with like 10 or 20% or?
Yes, absolutely. So that is research. That testing is happening at the research level. So that's
Oh, okay.
hard to do in human in clients and patients. But where the overgrowths, sometimes the stool panels, the qPCR testing will show us candida.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we'll see it in the urine. We'll
Yeah.
see fungal biomarkers going up, and we'll see other clues as well. And then sometimes there's just very strong clues, like somebody has a thick coating, white coating on their tongue,
Right.
right? Or their sinuses are always stuffy. And the clinic I work with, the doctor there runs Marcon testing, and Marcon is a nasal swab. So, and it shows you, I don't necessarily use it to test for that like Marcon bacteria, but for fungi. And because it shows you the fungal overgrowths that are happening in your sinuses, it's just such an interesting test. And that's so common for people to have a hidden sinus fungal infection that as
Yeah.
soon as it's provoked a little bit, they're like, oh, wow, I can now, this has always been here and I can feel
The
that this,
difference.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so amazing. It's funny. I have a good friend who she's like, she knows that every year she's going to get at minimum 1 and possibly 2 sinus infections. And, there is also that piece in Ayurveda that speaks to the weakest tissue. And that's where, if you're going to get sick, that's where it's going to kind of land, kind of thing. I seem to recall that as a concept. But I also think in her case, she probably has, bugs that have built up a biofilm and that are hiding up there. And so the antibiotics reduce the load so that she can function till the next time, but they're always sitting there waiting for the next opportunity to pop.
Yeah, exactly. And in Ayurveda, we talk about nasya, which is,
that's what I couldn't remember the name.
yeah. So nasya is the practice of cleansing the sinus and seeing the sinus and organ system. And something that they'll say is the emotions are trapped in the sinuses. And
Interesting.
it honestly feels like that when you're, when you clear some sinus biofilm or a bunch of mucus out from there, it feels like you got rid of a whole load
Yeah.
of like energy, and you feel lighter and better. But yeah, treating the sinuses, I think a lot of these microbes evolve, and the sinuses have become a huge part of the work I do, and figuring out strategies to properly eradicate, but also inoculate the sinus microbiome, so that the right species of Lactobacillus sacchi, which is a prominent species, we can colonize in there.
Nice. So what kind of testing do you like the best for when you're testing your clients? Like, are you doing stool testing? And I mean, and it's interesting because it's such a diverse and such a new field in so many ways. I think there's really more diverse kind of, there's testing for different microbiomes now that's coming out, and that wouldn't have been available 1 or 2 or even 5 years ago. So what are the tests that you seem to be going to that you're the most excited about in that space for helping people with their microbiome medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main one is, the cornerstone is the GI map. I find that it just has the sensitivity and it correlates with the symptomology so well that people are having. And as a tool for retesting, it can be really beneficial. So that's the Diagnostic Solutions GI map. and
Yeah.
that's a qPCR test. In addition to that, I really like Microbiome Labs. They have their Biome FX, and
Yeah.
they have their vaginal biome test kit as well.
Which is
I
new, right? Yeah.
which is very new, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been running, sometimes I'll run all three of those. So some people wonder, well, why two stool tests? Because one is whole genome sequencing and the other is quantitative PCR. And I find that it gives us different types of data, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I am in the field of working with people to make them feel better. Every company is going to say, just stick to our test. You don't need the other test. But I found the blending of these two tests to be super broad spectrum. The Biome FX will give me a little bit more of a scope of just what that diversity looks like, that alpha, beta diversity, and to see what kind of foods may be beneficial, maybe what kind of fibers may be beneficial to that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I love Biome FX, and then their vaginal test kit is super beneficial and interesting, and it lets you see what strains are dominant, and it's obviously a different type of biome. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want diversity in the vaginal biome. We don't want a lot of diversity in the sinus biome either.
Yeah.
So it's just like seeing what's happening there, right? And I've seen fungi and yeast pop up. There's a theory that a lot of men have hidden fungal infections in their urogenital tract. It's just very hard to test for them, you know?
Yeah.
So I think the vaginal biome test kit has been super helpful for me.
Yeah, no, and it's super important. I mean, it's super important for health, but it's also at childbirth. It's that first inoculation that the baby gets, right? So in a better world, we have a healthier microbiome to inoculate that baby with. Okay, so microbiome medicine is about rebalancing and nurturing that healthy biome. Ayurveda is herbal medicine. We're talking about doshas and also rebalancing the system in many other ways. And then Awais, you then come across these things called peptides, and you're like, okay, now what do I do with this? So tell us about your first kind of contact with peptides and how you started to get your head around, okay, what am I going to do with these things?
Yeah, so I had this shoulder injury and this muscle issue when I was very young. I was 18, 19 at that time. And I was going to any and every doctor to get some answers. And this doctor I found in LA, he just started treating me for free and just started working with me, started giving me PRP, things that were actually making a difference. And he told me that he wants to try something new on me. And he said he was working with a lot of NBA athletes at that time, many of whom would recover very, very rapidly. When they would get an injury during a game, they would just come back like the next game. And it was like, how could they recover that fast? So he's like, this is something I'm doing with some of those guys. And these were peptides. So he just started injecting me with peptide blends. And he knew I was really interested in medicine, and he taught me a lot. He kind of took me under his wing in many ways and started teaching me. And he would give me these printouts on different types of peptides. And something he told me, he's like, and this was now 12 years ago about. So
Yeah,
this
so
was
he's really ahead of the curve. Yeah.
he was way ahead, and he told me and also just to point out, that made the biggest difference. It healed my shoulder injuries. I was fully functioning after that, so I knew it was something remarkable. So he gave me these printouts, and he would tell me that there's going to come a time when taking growth hormone HGH is going to be old news, and people
Mm-hmm.
are just going to be using growth hormone peptides, and there's going to be anti-inflammatory peptides and all these things. And he's like, just you wait, like peptides are the future. It's one of those things you can't forget when
Yeah.
somebody says, just you wait, and
Yeah.
then you wait and that thing happens, you know?
Yeah.
So I've been really interested in them for a long time. And working with, like I said, a medical team that can. So anytime I'm talking about the use of peptides, it's always, within that like medical legal context. But they are really, really remarkable. They've been tremendous for my health. Some of the clinics I was supporting during COVID, they were just so utterly remarkable. And then, there was all that drama with thymosin alpha 1, the immune peptide getting banned. And a lot of clinicians really struggled during that time because like that made such a big difference. And then so yeah, I've just seen it. It's such a huge part of what I do.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's back up a second. And I kind of jumped ahead a little. Like, what would a microbiome medicine protocol look like? I mean, we kind of touched on the different pieces, right? We touched on the testing, we touched on, the prebiotics, the probiotics, there's diet in there. But when you're writing someone a protocol, or you're walking with them through a protocol, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I found that writing the 10-page protocol actually doesn't work for most people. We just you don't show them the journey. You just say, okay, here's where we're going today. Here's where we're going to go tomorrow. And then by the time it's over, they're like, wow, I can't believe how much I've done. And if I would have known I was going to do all that work, I never would have signed up for this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So plus the journey evolves depending on how they respond. So, but what is like a microbiome medicine kind of protocol look like? And obviously it's going to be different for different people.
Yeah, but that's such a great question. And like you said, obviously the journey evolves, and a lot of practitioners now are getting really sensitive to getting those outcomes, getting that client-patient adherence, right? That's a huge thing for me, is like I want to see people get better. I love science, but I'm not in it for the science. I'm in it to see those outcomes, see people change their lives. So guiding people appropriately, course correction is so important. It's like sailing a boat on the sea. You know which way the winds are going to come, but you may have to change the sails from time to time, right? So the way people respond just it can change a lot of things, starting with some kind of a clinical liver detoxification often is good, opening up the lymphatic system, opening up the pipes on both sides, as I like to say, is super duper important, so that when we are eradicating something, the systems are in place to bind those up, package them, and excrete them from your body. So that's kind of where I start with most people. Some people have to stay there longer because their lymph is just clogged up, right? Think about a chronic Lyme disease a patient. Their lymphatic system has been stuck, and their body's in that deep fight or flight stress. So we got to slowly start opening things up. Then it often does go big to small, but it's just more complicated than that. So big to small meaning bigger microbe first, larger parasitic organisms first, then we go to smaller bacteria, and in between that, fungi. But it's also about what is opportunist, right? Like if somebody has an H. pylori infection and they have parasites, but they have gastritis symptoms, their throat is burning, their stomach feels like it's fiery from the H. pylori, we have to address the H. pylori first, then do the other stuff. But we have to work in such a way where that the H. pylori doesn't come back. So it's what Grace has taught me is it's rounds and phases, and kind of moving through them appropriately, knowing when to pause. It's a real art form. The old model of like getting a lab test and on a piece of paper, here's your protocol, bye,
See you in 3 months.
Exactly. That's old news now, because people can't do that, and also it just, you got to know how to navigate and support people with all these steps.
I love that. Yeah. And people have reactions to things, right? And so you, to your point, you have to back down. You might have to help them through something. But when you talk about opening the lymphatic system and getting it flowing, are you talking about it like from a mechanistic perspective, like doing rebounding and stuff? Or are you also using herbs and other compounds to free the lymphatic system? I know I used to work with a company. Do you ever hear of Physica Energetics?
No, I have not.
You would love Physica Energetics, and they kind of
Okay.
got chased out of Canada by Health Canada a few
Mm,
years ago, and to order from them now is a bit of a nightmare.
mhm,
But it's a company that kind of blends homeopathic with Ayurvedic and a bunch of other stuff in and nutraceuticals. And
mm,
they always talked about their protocols would start with lymphatic drainage, and they had 3 different
mhm.
lymphatic drainage homeopathics that helped different stages of lymph to clear. So I'm just curious, how do you help your clients' lymph system to kind of start to free up when it's been so jammed up for so long?
Yeah, that is such a good question and such a unique art form, opening those pathways up. And it tends to be a little bit different from person to person. I do like Quicksilver's
Yeah.
stuff. I do love their push catch. I love the kidney care. I've seen some tremendous things with kidney care,
Mm-hmm.
and certain symptoms clearing up when they start taking kidney care. And I also like some Chinese herbs.
Yeah.
And then I test for, not to go down that rabbit hole, but something called glucuronidation
Mm-hmm.
is a type of detox pathway that can be impaired in people. And if that's the case, if I'm seeing that showing up in the blood testing or the stool testing, I will put them on glucuronidation support for that
Right.
lymphatic opening, and sometimes that'll give them the right like sauce to get the limbs to open up. But then I always do, that this is where like the Ayurvedic inspiration comes in, is like you got to do both things always. And what those two things are for people is going to be different. Some people, they need to move a lot more out, their pipes are starting to get open. We do some heavy herbs, and then we put them in the sauna with
Mm.
red light, and then
Mm-hmm.
we take some binders right after that, right? Some people, they need a little bit of rebounding. Some people, dry skin brushing is all they can handle, and they can only dry skin brush a small part of their body, and then day to day they can brush some more, and they're like, wait a second, things are moving. Some people, they want to go for a jog, and then some people have even found that the lymph draining between the herbs and the binders, at like working out, if they can work out, that almost feels like it's dumping a lot of stuff out of the limb, and
Sure.
that's worked for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, you've got the mechanical movement, the mechanical action of draining, and then the herbs and the tinctures and whatever else that's going to provide the stimulus to the body to do the work as well. So that's pretty
Mhm.
interesting. Okay. So now, just being conscious of time, we're good. We're still good. We still have time. Um, so what how are you now weaving peptides through like, how are you bringing all this together? You've kind of alluded to it already, right? Because even in your microbiome medicine, you're pulling on Ayurvedic herbs and medicine and bringing that into the picture. So you're not just using probiotics, prebiotics, that kind of stuff. You're already bringing the Ayurvedic piece, bringing somebody's dosha into play. And so how does a person's dosha, for example, how's that going to impact the type of protocol you're going to put them on? Is that
That's-
too complicated a question, or can you kind
no,
of go
absolutely
there?
not. That,
Okay,
that
cool.
should be that should be a very reasonable question for somebody
Okay.
who uses Ayurveda. So yeah, the dosha is important, and this is where Ayurveda is a portion of what I do and
Yeah,
not all of what I do. There's many components of Ayurveda that I do not practice and I think are outdated. And the vision I've had, my grandfather's not in this world anymore, but the vision I've had is like, if he was here, he
Mm-hmm.
would like science to update some things. That's like what
Sure.
he would want. That's
Yeah.
what a lot of the Ayurvedic ancestors would want. Um, so, but with some conditions, right, like chronic Lyme, that's a very Vata type of depleting disorder. So with something like that, the appropriate nourishment tends to be really important. The example I give is someone who is and I've worked with a lot of people. I'm in LA, so I've gotten some, like retired models that are kind of thin, and they love their sauna. Tell you what, they love their sauna, they love their colon hydrotherapy, they love their juice cleanses, and they're just like, oh, great. So when I'm doing this protocol, I think I can take it to the next level if I pair it with the juice cleanse. I think I'll take it to the next level if I pair it with a soup cleanse or a broth cleanse. And I'm like, no, you're already like very thin and depleted.
Mm-hmm.
And that would deplete your system too much. You're too vata.
Yeah.
As we work on the lymphatic system, I want to nourish your body. I actually want you to eat more ghee. I want you to eat more fat. Um, Sometimes like some old school stuff that my grandpa used to do, like making ghee emulsions, can be really, really great for someone like that, like emulsifying some of the herbs and the botanicals in the ghee, because it provides that nourishing property. Oil massages, right? Like just anything and everything to nourish the body. And then anything you take beyond just the botanical, there's other supplements we take, right? Like fish oils, fish oil extracts, different types of lipid extracts.
Mm-hmm.
They all have properties to them. They're vata, and this is Ayurvedic herbalism. So if someone's very depleted, they're very vata, their skin is dry, they're thin, they have a vata type of, condition, they're anxiolytic, I'm not going to put them on a bunch of vata herbs. I'm going to put them on something that's a little bit more nourishing.
And grounding. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. So yeah, so I mean, so you're kind of pulling from different disciplines and bringing it all together. So where do the peptides fit in? Because you talked about the peptides healed your shoulder, which is super awesome, but you've moved past, and we've talked a little bit about immune peptides, but now we know that peptides can be very powerful for gut healing. They can be very powerful for sometimes putting out the fire of inflammation, which can make a mess out of anything else you're trying to do. So how do you weave peptides through your your Uber protocol when you're trying to start from the microbiome up into the system?
That's a great question. So what comes to my mind is, if you remember like those Fast and Furious movies where they would have the nitrous oxide, and they're racing in their cars, and then they would hit that nitrous oxide and then it would just go zoom by and it would be like super fast. So doing protocols without peptides and then adding the peptides, they kind of work like nitrous oxide a little bit.
It's
They
like the
speed up.
turbojet. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It speeds up the protocol. It speeds up that nourishment, right? So how do both of these disciplines intersect with peptides? Some peptides have a doshic quality to them, is something
Really?
I learned. So yeah, so like BPC is, it's very grounding. It's a little bit of pitta, but it's mostly like very grounding. It's kapha.
Mm-hmm.
VIP is it can be a little bit reducing, because it can create that flush that can be a little bit reducing. Someone who's got that vata expression, it's not going to be good for them. But people who are kapha orientation, kapha dominant, the VIP is fantastic for them. Um,
Interesting.
yeah. So just thinking about that nourishment piece, obviously, like that's just a portion. a portion of the framework. And, if somebody needs immune modulation, then they need immune modulation, which is going to be thymosin alpha 1. Or if somebody needs that ligament healing, then thymosin beta 4. But
Yeah.
I have found that can be just an interesting kind of way to think about it with the different anti-inflammatory peptides. And I've been just seeing that with some of just my community and my friends, seeing how these doshic categorizations play out with people. And it's been really interesting to see sometimes it line up.
Yeah. Like I was going to say, like, can you almost in a way predict how somebody's going to respond to something based on, their doshic tendencies, let's say, and then you're like, yeah, like the average Joe might give them the TB4, but I think BPC 157 is going to hit it for this guy, like, are you finding that kind of thing?
Exactly. It's that intuition that's a huge part of it, and Ayurveda and Ayurvedic practice should be about enhancing your intuition, I think, at the level. I don't use tongue and pulse diagnosis, but I think on one level it's all about the intuition and increasing that. So yes, it does. It gives you that sensibility. Like maybe this person should start off with just a lower dose. Maybe this person can handle more and they would actually benefit from this dosage point for this. And then some people who are, unique kapha, pitta types, because they have so much pitta in them already, or vata in them, that's reducing the semaglutide, is not going to be good for their weight loss goals. We can do something different to kind of just balance the doshas out rather than that. So it's given me a unique lens to kind of think about this work.
Yeah, it's a very different lens than generally speaking, for something like a semaglutide or tirzepatide, you see someone in front of you who, they're just kind of stuck, right? They seem to be doing everything right. Their bodies can't release weight for some reason. I don't think we worry too much typically about anything else other than this person needs to move weight. Let's try this peptide and see if that helps them. It's definitely a bit more nuanced there. So, and are you using peptides also for healing the gut, that kind of thing as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's the turbo speed thing you were talking about, right?
Yes, definitely. And it's, the gut obviously impacts, 70% of your immune system is in your gut, the gut associated lymphoid tissue. So supporting that ecosystem with, BPC, if thymosin alpha 1 is needed, if TB4, KPV, the level up health, GI repair is a phenomenal blend. People have really been benefiting from that and enjoying that.
Yeah, no, that is one of the most powerful gut healing formulas I've seen in a very long time, just from the peptide world. But one thing I found lately with people is, I fell into this trap a little bit when I first came across peptides. I was like, oh my God, BPC 157, it's amazing. It's going to heal the gut. And then you forget that, well, there's a mucus layer there that has to be restored. There's integrity. There's other things that have to be taken care of. And so to truly heal the gut, the BPC, the lorazepam, the KPV, they're all going to do their thing. But the restoration of that whole environment is not going to happen from those peptides. It's going to be both the diet and like companies like Microbiome Labs that have that full GI restoration protocol that helps to rebuild the systems around the gut that also support the health and make it stick in a way.
Exactly. And I'm not calling anyone in particular out, but like I said, I'm in Los Angeles and I've seen some regenerative medicine practices that will have somebody walk in, give them $5,000 of peptides for a few months, put them on exosomes, and that's the treatment protocol for everything. So people are spending 15,000, 20,000 a month, and I'm like, it's not even doing that much. You're going to feel better temporarily, but the candida is still there. The
Yeah.
dysfunctions are still there. That mucous membrane is not going to get the nourishment that it needs, and you're going to feel better, but then you're going to go back. So might as well hit it in a more thorough process, and then, taking the lorazepam, just keeping that gut lining sealed while we are killing fungi with botanical can just be kind of like that turbocharge to get you to, you know, get you to clear more fungi in that process.
Yeah, and help the results to stick, really, right? Because to your point, like temporarily you can help someone feel better, but the results aren't going to stick if you haven't really done the full job of from the foundation up. So now, so I guess that kind of leads into the next question, which I think is what you're driving at, is that some of the limitations and the way that people are using peptides kind of all wrong right now. And I think we both kind of hit on it in a way, is just almost over relying on them, thinking that they're the final answer and the silver bullet. But is there other stuff that you're seeing?
Absolutely. One thing that I think people are doing that is not good is lots and lots and lots of thymosin alpha 1. There was a podcast with a Ben Greenfield podcast on I think, I can't remember, I want to say it was Cook, who mentioned the use of higher doses of thymosin alpha 1 to support blood thinning properties. And I just remember lots of people were interested. They were asking about thymosin alpha 1. They're like, great, I'll just take 2 milligrams, 3 milligrams a day. I see people with white coated tongues just blasting thymosin alpha 1. Yeah, and it's like, it actually, I think that I love thymosin alpha 1 in context, but just as an example of, bad practice, you having fungi and thrush and yeast overgrowth in your body, I think thymosin alpha 1, taking it for, 2 months without doing anything else, you may be doing possibly some damage to the body there, because now the immune system, you're modulating the immune system to handle that immune burden, which is that exactly what we want. We want to eradicate that. I don't want to modulate necessarily that immune burden. I would rather address it while modulating at the same time.
That's an interesting point. It's interesting because I know a number of doctors who used, but a very low dose. They would, over the last couple of years, have used TA1 kind of prophylactically on a weekly basis, but not even close to the doses you're talking about, like quite low, maybe 1.5 milligrams, maybe once or twice a week, just to kind of keep the immune system primed, but almost not allowing the immune system to just not that the immune system would, but not over relying on the TA1 to do all the heavy lifting. You're still allowing for a lot of other things to go on at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a fantastic use. And I know lots of, practitioners that were doing that. And I think that has tended to work well. And then pairing that with some, if the context was viruses, right? Like gentle antivirals, if it's dysbiosis, gentle antimicrobials, then they can handle the antimicrobials when somebody has, 250 micrograms to 500 micrograms of thymosin alpha 1 on board. And it doesn't even need to be every day. It can just be a week for that to take place.
Yeah, no, that's I'm all in on that. I think that low dose kind of intermittent use. And again, I think it goes to what we see a lot with many different things when it comes to the body, is that it tends to respond better to pulses than it does to chronic inputs.
Absolutely. I think, your peptide community and the data you've been gathering on yourself, and the self-experimentation, and just this very short couple of years we've had in seeing how peptides work, just pulsing in practice. One is pulsing for biohacking and optimization, but pulsing even in the protocols that I'm doing is so important, because there is a dose dependent curve that tends to die down, and then you're bringing that curve back up when you're pulsing. And we even pulse antimicrobials. We go a week off and from time to time, and that can be super important. And there's people who look at that who say, well, then the bugs are going to come back. It's not quite that simple, especially when you're doing longer antimicrobial regimens, and there's other things we can do to prevent the bugs from coming back that week. But there is just such good feedback in the body to pulsing.
Yeah. Well, even I remember, oh God, I think I interviewed someone, and I don't know if it was an interview or if it was one of my teachers at school, talking about when you're going after candida to switch up your antifungals, not to use the same one chronically for like 3 months in a row. Like she would kind of cycle through different antifungals to go after the candida so that it wouldn't do that thing that organisms do, which is develop a defense system. And then you end up with kind of like a super candida kind of thing, where when you're varying up your attacks, you're going at it different ways. And it's actually more effective that way than to just go at it with, I don't know, garlic extract or whatever it is that you're using.
Exactly. Yes. That is the art of microbiome medicine, is knowing how to stack, how to pulse, and then how to switch. So even if we're talking about one thing that is like candida overgrowth, something like horopito extract, black seed oil, mono, caprylic acid, all of these are undicyclic acid. All of these are important antifungals, and just knowing how to combine them. You can't take all of them at once, and you can't just take one either. So that's the art form of knowing that. And in some people, it needs to be something very gentle, like grape seed extract, along with another gentle antimicrobial, until their body can handle that clearing out, and then we can go stronger, and then they feel really, really good. I've just seen people feel so phenomenal once this candida stuff is balanced out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little bit what you said earlier about the chronic sinus issues, that when they clear out, it's only when they clear out that people realize how miserable they were before, but they just gotten so used to feeling that way that they didn't know they were, you see people like they don't know how crappy they feel until they feel better. And then they look back and go, oh my God, I just thought that was my norm.
Yeah. They don't know how much space you're supposed to have in your nose. A lot of people have forgotten that. Like, this is a space that, you're not supposed to feel like you're breathing through a straw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a storage space that's supposed to be full, actually. It's
right.
a backup system.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So as we start to wind ourselves down here a little bit, let's bring it all together. I mean, like from a longevity purpose, I think there's not enough attention probably brought to the whole the whole load we've been talking about here of parasites and microbiome, microbial phages, funguses. People, I mean, I see a lot of people who are like, okay, let's do that optimization protocol so that I can live longer and be healthier, which is amazing. But I think that could you talk a little bit about how the cost from a longevity and a health span's perspective of not clearing this load before you kind of start the optimization, or, how it's going to possibly drag you down without you even realizing it?
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's hidden. That's the big thing about this stuff, is it's hidden. It's very, very hard to test for some of these things. I can put people on a few rounds of antiparasitics, sometimes a pharmaceutical, but mostly botanicals, and literally have them send me pictures of worms that are in their poop. Right?
Nice.
And I heard you say nice.
What a fun job you have.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm just immune to it. I can be eating salad or noodles and somebody sends me that. It just doesn't faze me. And just taking a look at that, and I'm like, that is so interesting. And it's like undeniably a worm. And some people go crazy. They're like, they're like, hey, my stool test said I had no worm, but this came out of me. And like, do you have a lab I can send this to? And like to get this like
Analyze.
sequence
Yeah.
and analyze. I'm like, and it's really interesting to see people like eradicate worms. And it's also just like you said, we forget what we're supposed to feel like. Like when I did my first round of anti-parasitic herbs and my anti-parasitic program, clearing out my gut, I saw more worms than I could possibly imagine come out of me. And I'm a thin guy. And I was like, where could they be? But what changed is my belly became completely flat. And I thought that
Mm.
extra space was like fat or something like that, sticking out, but it just became like these
If
very
you've ever
shaped.
met Awais, fat is not a word that comes to mind. I'm just putting it out there.
Yes, I'm a thin, tall, thin build. And so it just like the shape of my belly changed and the way I felt changed. The way I felt after eating rice and carbs changed. And the
Interesting.
way my brain feels just felt so different. My cognitive function felt different. I didn't get that blood sugar spike after eating, carbs after working out anymore. And it just was so remarkable to see that. And I've just seen one thing I'm seeing in men over and over again right now, and I would love for there to be a study on this so we can explore this further, is we eradicate the candida in a really appropriate manner and their testosterone goes up so
Interesting.
much that their endocrinologist starts doubting them and starts saying, "You sure you haven't been taking testosterone,
Interesting.
injection?" And and that's happened not once or twice, but many times. And my mentor, Dr. Grace Lewis, she's talked about those cases as well. And then the visceral fat in these same guys, just like starting to disappear, right? Like a lot of people work out, they eat right. They're like, why doesn't my body like respond the way that I would like it to? I'm doing everything right. Clearing up the microbiome and giving you that really beautiful, diverse garden can sometimes take you there. And I really hope there's on the research side of things, we can validate some of these things and just explore them in the future.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point, Awais. And I think you said it earlier as well. Like when you start doing this work that's so far upstream, it's amazing to see what else falls into place. And all these other things people thought they had to work on that suddenly seem to just resolve on their own. And I mean, there might be another sticking point down the road, but it's different than what you might have gone at earlier if you hadn't done that work first. So that's kind of magical, right? I think it's the kind of thing that I know I've spoken to you enough about this to know this is what gets you kind of charged up, like watching people just kind of get better and feel better and seeing the results that you achieve.
Absolutely. And people feel not even remembering what that good felt like for so many years. They're like, oh, I thought this was good. They're like, I didn't know I can wake up feeling this good and I can eat all these different foods, right? Like not live in this like bubble where I can't eat more than this many carbs. I can't eat this thing. I can't eat that thing. Something that I really believe is resiliency is so important. I don't like gluten. I personally don't eat gluten, but I don't think that we should avoid gluten like it's the plague either, right?
Mm.
That's a
Mm-hmm.
I like to go out from time to time and just have like a one bread roll, just to
Yeah.
know, okay, my body is resilient, and I think testing that resiliency, and I've taken some people there who were so utterly sensitive um, to any and all foods to a point where they're like, hey, I just had a pizza the other day and I feel perfectly fine. Not
Yeah.
going to do it all the time, but it's just amazing that I can have pizza.
Yeah, no, I think, there's another guy who does this kind of work, and I ran through his program. I actually took his course. His name is Joel Green. And I went from someone who couldn't tolerate dairy to someone who can now have a whey protein shake anytime she wants. I can eat beans, I can eat rice, I can eat all these foods that I thought, oh, I can't tolerate those. I'll blow up like a balloon. And it was really by rebuilding that diversity in the microbiome, readdressing and feeding the right species, and they kind of do the work for you. So I'm all over that, and I'm all over building that resilience back into the system and giving. You may not choose to eat a thing anyway, but you could if you needed to or if you wanted to, and that's a big distinction. It takes the orthorexia away.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say is like I love Joel Green, and I use his products and his systems, and I've met his lead scientist at a conference, and so I use a lot of Joel Green's products and things, and they are a part of that reinoculation phase for me.
For sure. All right, Awais. Well, we could keep talking for a long time, but I think we're coming up on time. So any parting words of wisdom you'd like to leave with the audience, and then tell people where to find you?
I think just the last thing I'll tell people is something I've learned from Ayurveda is like sometimes you're feeling that fieriness, or you're feeling like angry or upset at yourself, or just feeling bad, and just know it's not you, it's the pitta in you. So
it's the fire.
It's the fire. So just be gentle on yourself. And a lot of us came to the world of longevity and biohacking because of our health challenges, and some of us are still in them. So I think that's just something so important, the mind, body, spirit piece, to reconnect the spirit with the body, is just be gentle on yourself, be easy as you're doing all this work. And then you said, where can people find me? So my practice is called Integrative Oasis. And you can find me on Instagram. I have my website, integrativeoasis.com. But, I'm very accessible. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. That's just Integrative Oasis with nothing afterwards. And you can find me there.
Amazing. Well, and we'll put everything in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for your time today, Awais. It's always such a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to seeing you at the next conference.
Absolutely, Natalie. Yes, thank you as well. This is amazing.
Thank you.